Jeez.
You want it? You can have it. And not compromise stifled soul-killing love, but open, honest, life-affirming love.
Who doesn't love romance, especially in fiction, where everything is over the top, dramatic, and full of actions, words, and moments which never occur in everyday mundane life? Rooting for fictional couples, or shipping as it's more commonly referred to, is such an ingrained, and sometimes insane, part of fandom life. And today, at the request of several subscribers, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 ships, otherwise known as one true pairings. As some of you know, I recently hit over 1,000 followers, and since you all are the ones who helped me reach this awesome feat, I figured filling a vid request was the least I could do to thank you. So, from number 10 through to number 1, here are my top 10 OTPs of all time.
I don't want to be light and casual with you. I don't want to pretend that what I feel about you is some stupid, frothy thing that doesn't matter because it is like the axis that my world turns on.
In 2014, a little web series popped up on YouTube and a ship stole my heart. Very loosely based on the novel by J. Sheridan LaFanu, Carmilla followed the adventures of college student Laura Hollis as she uncovered the supernatural secrets of her university while falling for broody gay vampire Carmilla Karnstein. I kind of have this fetish for vampire-human relationships and the dynamics they produce, and in the case of Laura and Carmilla, I was pleasantly surprised to find an intriguing subversion of the usual vampire-human lovers tropes. In these types of relationships, it is so often the guilt-ridden vampire who has to change and redeem themselves in order to earn the love of the hero and to be worthy of their affections. Carmilla turns this on its head by presenting Carmilla Karnstein as an apathetic but not guilt-ridden vampire who commits acts of goodness solely because of her love for Laura. Carmilla doesn't want or need redemption and has no interest in changing her ways. Instead, it is Laura who is forced to change, and Laura who has to learn to accept Carmilla's vampire side and past while adjusting her black and white view on the world. Instead of presenting Carmilla as not worthy of Laura's love unless redeemed, Laura and Carmilla both must grow as individuals and learn to exist in one another's worlds before they can cement their love. Laura and Carmilla's story is a beautifully written and surprisingly realistic love story. They go through all the stages of a new relationship and have to grow from enemies to friends to crushes to lovers, discarding the idealistic view they have of each other and learning to trust and rely on one another, accepting each other's flaws and becoming equal partners. The two actresses have amazing chemistry and imbue the on-screen relationship with genuine emotion, whether the characters are flirting, fighting, or working together to overcome the big bad. It's definitely one of the more organic relationships I've seen unfold on-screen in recent years, and my love for it will not waver.
We are the future, Clarke. And I don't want anything to stand in the way of our friendship.
Whether you shipped Klana or Clois, or even Clarke and Chloe, there is no denying that the true relationship at the heart of Smallville was Clarke and Lex. Whether one reads it as romantic or platonic, Clarke and Lex's relationship shapes both characters as well as the series itself, and every time I watch Smallville, it breaks my heart all over again. The decision to make Clark Kent and Lex Luthor such close friends was perhaps a risky one, but the gamble paid off. From their first meeting, there is an instant connection between Clark and Lex, and an unlikely yet solid friendship grows from this. For the entirety of the series, Clark and Lex are presented as foils for each other, showing how they each could have ended up like the other were it not for their differing circumstances. Amid the symbolism and exploration of themes of good versus evil is a beautiful and genuine relationship in which both men face losing others due to their love for one another, choose each other over their family, and fight to keep their friendship intact. Their dynamic is intense and tragic, as we know that these two are doomed to become enemies, and watching the slow decline of their relationship as they hurt and betray each other is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the series. Despite the show establishing that Clark and Lex have a platonic, at times brotherly, connection, it is very easy to read the relationship as romantic, and sometimes I think of the added tragedy a romantic relationship between the two would have produced. Either way, there's no denying that the series would not have been the same without this tragic and deep relationship, and even though I also ship Clarke romantically with other characters, no relationship on this show kills me more than the one between a young Clark Kent and a not yet evil Lex Luthor. And honestly, it's one of the main reasons I still love the series so much.
I'm still a hawk. I can morph, but I can only stay human for 2 hours.
Growing up in the 90s, most young adult fiction came in the form of serialized novels such as The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, and Goosebumps. One series stood apart from the rest for its mature themes and dark take on war, and this is where my number 8 ship comes from. Animorphs was a series focused on a group of child soldiers forced into an alien war by a chance encounter, and 2 of those kids were the amazingly fierce Rachel Berenson and the shy, bully target Tobias, who was trapped forever in the body of a hawk. One truly does not know pain until they've shipped a ship in which one half is a bird. Despite obstacles, Rachel and Tobias were one of the most endearing ships of my early teens. Each loses themselves to the war they were fighting, and their relationship with one another helps to tether them to their humanity. Rachel's arc sees her descend into a barely functional Blood Knight, whose violence horrifies those around her, but Tobias always sees the compassionate and strong girl beneath, and while Tobias does eventually regain the ability to morph his human body, he remains an anomaly, a human trapped in an animal's body, and Rachel's love and the way she sees the boy behind the bird grounds him and helps to keep his human side alive. Rereading the Animorphs books as an adult made me truly realize how broken and dysfunctional Rachel and Tobias were as a ship, but how they were absolutely necessary to one another during the war. Neither could ever fully look at or completely accept the other, blindly denying the parts they didn't want to see. But there is no denying that neither would have made it through the war without the other, as they kept each other tethered to reality and brought out the best in each other, even as they both allowed the war to overtake them. And there is something beautiful and completely endearing about that.
I don't want sunbursts or marble halls. I just want you.
Long before I had ever even heard of the term shipping, a scrawny redhead heroine broke a slate over a young man's head, and a ship grabbed my heart and never let go. Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe were my first and remain my longest OTP. What's not to love about this enemies to lovers story? Whether you ship them from the novels or, as I did, from the Kevin Sullivan miniseries, their journey from competitors to hesitant friends to kindred spirits and eventually lovers is entertaining, at times hilarious, and absolutely riveting. Anne's stubbornness and pride and Gil's determination to break down her barriers provides an extremely fun dynamic, and the chemistry between Megan Follows and the late Jonathan Crombie practically explodes off the screen. Their softer and slower journey in the sequel saw them becoming close friends, and had Anne go through an intense personal journey in which she had to face her own buried feelings and admit that she had loved Gil almost as long as he had loved her. My love for this pairing has never wavered through my many rewatches of the series and after finally reading all of the novels. They are a beautiful pairing with a rich and involved relationship, and I will always come back to watch their story unfold time and again, probably until I'm a grey and wrinkled old lady.
This is my story, and it's your story.
And how is that?
That 7-year-old boy who found you, that was me.
Emma and August were my first and remain my main Once Upon a Time ship. Canon be damned. It sounds odd, but there is something so appealingly broken about this ship. They were 2 children sent through a magical wardrobe together, one tasked with looking after the other and failing miserably, and the journey to repair that failure could have been amazing. Emma and August were 2 people who grew up to be hardened adults, putting up walls to protect themselves and refusing to let people get close, and they seem to recognize this in one another. They connect through these similarities, drawn to one another and wanting to know more about each other. Their relationship over the course of season 1 was actually fairly intense, despite Bella getting off the ground in a romantic sense. August seemed to be able to read Emma quite well in a very short space of time, and she was definitely one of the few people he allowed to get to know him. Their relationship was full of highs and lows. They were suspicious of each other, they disappointed one another, they lost faith, but always seemed to reconcile. I always loved the history between Emma and August, the fact that they travelled to this world together, that August was supposed to guide her, but instead failed her, and felt so guilty that he ended up with a physical manifestation of said guilt. It was always so clear how much he cared about her, and how much he tormented himself over having wronged her. There was a lot of trust building that needed to happen between the two, and season 1 definitely made a good start, showing the two grow closer and having Emma discover and reconcile with their past. If the show had chosen to, they could have turned these two into an amazing ship, built on history and forgiveness. It's such a pity that it never happened because it could have been a beautiful and intense relationship, and it's just such a shame that the show chose not to explore it.
I shouldn't tell you this, but when you were on the ring, she called you on the radio every day for 6 years. You didn't know that, did you?
These days, I am 99.99% sure that Bellamy and Clarke will not become a canon couple. And yet, a tiny 0.01% of me keeps hoping, because no ship on this show makes as much sense as Clarke Griffin and Bellamy Blake, the head and the heart, the soul of the show, and the main relationship which drives Clarke and Bellamy's individual actions across the seasons. Since season 1, we have seen this relationship grow and evolve, watched Clarke and Bellamy go from antagonistic separate people to reluctant co-leaders to a strong and united partnership, reaching a place where they can read one another better than anyone else, know what the other is thinking, and operate on the same wavelength. They've been through ups and downs, fought and betrayed one another, fallen in love with other people, and spent 6 years apart. And yet, they keep coming back to one another, constantly reconnecting and choosing each other over almost everyone else. And, despite the showrunner screaming platonic until he's blue in the face, the actors have great physical and romantic chemistry, and it just seems like not making them a canon romantic couple is being petulant and going against the natural progression of the relationship. It just makes so much sense for Bellamy and Clarke to be together, to finally show the build-up of feelings overflow, to see these two people who connect so well on so many different levels finally be given the chance to be with one another in a romantic sense. It would be organic and beautiful, and everything that a sizable chunk of the fandom, myself included, would love to see. But, as I said, I have lost almost all hope that this will happen, as the show keeps passing over opportunity after opportunity to finally canonize this amazing ship.
What is it about you that makes me melt?
Maybe it's that I love you.
That's gotta be it.
Fred and Gunn were my very first ship on Angel, and I remain, to this day, really disappointed over the decimation of said ship. Fred and Gunn had one of the most well-developed relationships in the Buffyverse. It was a relationship based on mutual feelings and respect, a relationship which started with friendship and blossomed into this incredible love story between two people who absolutely adored each other. Gunn never treated Fred as if she was fragile, delicate, or the damsel in distress, as others on the show did. He had such respect for her and her independence. He took her patrolling and treated her as an equal. She, in turn, adored him with every fibre of her being. She watched him when he wasn't looking and acknowledged how smart he was and how much the team needed him. She loved him, a big, huge, to the end of the world kind of love, and he loved her just as much. These were two people who knew each other so well, who talked and spent time together, and who had each other's backs. But alas, all good things must come to an end, and Fred and Gunn were eventually broken up to make way for another ship to take its place. But they will always have a place in my ship of heart, because they were one of the first examples of an equal and healthy relationship in the Buffyverse, and I will never stop wishing that they had remained so.
You said you can smell me. Well, I can smell you too. And my boy is still in there and he wants out.
Every ship on this list so far has been built of a loving relationship and a perceived romantic bond, even in the case of the non-canon couples. Darla and Angel are a different type of ship, a ship built not on a romantic love, but on a deep and undeniable connection, a complex and complicated backstory, and a relationship full of differing layers. Sire, mother, lover, mentor, Darla was to Angel what no other woman in the Buffyverse ever came close to being, and their deep connection and almost animalistic bond has kept me fascinated and intrigued for years. Angel and Darla have so many layers to their relationship. They are, at different times, lovers, enemies, parents, soulless monsters, and souled creatures. As soulless vampires, they painted Europe red and took each other to breathtaking and horrifying levels of violence and mayhem. As Angel's sire, Darla was simultaneously a mother and a lover to him, and while their relationship was not rooted in genuine affection, they were, for all intents and purposes, each other's mate. Darla knew Angel's darkest parts, and even when ensouled, she knew how to exploit these parts to a degree others didn't. She always seemed to have a hold over him, and when he saw her as human and accepting of her fate, he was able to love her despite all the darkness he associated with her. Their bond was fully cemented when Darla became pregnant with and delivered Angel's child. No matter who else Angel ended up loving, the child created a bond between Angel and Darla that no one else would ever share. It was kind of a beautiful end to a relationship which was always so based in darkness. In their last moments together, Angel and Darla saw that their relationship had created something good, something which would endure as their bond did, and I can't think of a more fitting and beautiful end to such a dark and complex ship.
Did you feel that?
I should get coffee sometime.
I'd love to, but the machine ate my dollar. I only got one left.
Where you go, Dutch?
So many of the relationships on Lost captured my heart, but none more so than the beautiful romance between James Sawyer Ford and Juliet Burke. An unlikely pairing, mostly developed off-screen, their bond and deep connection captured me from the first dropped breadcrumb, and the tragedy of their story will forever break my heart. After the disastrous love triangle between himself, Kate, and Jack, Sawyer was ready for a partner who would not only appreciate him, but would love him selflessly and unconditionally. Meanwhile, Juliet Burke had spent 3 years feeling like an outsider, abused and mistreated by Ben Linus, and she deserved the love and support and safety of someone who would put her above all others. Sawyer and Juliet found these things in one another, starting at the beginning of the 5th season when they were left behind on the island when the other survivors escaped. Initially forced to work together, it soon became apparent that this partnership was a natural and organic one, which both parties fell into easily, quickly learning to trust one another and having each other's backs. After the time jump, we were treated to a beautifully equal and deep romance, in which both Sawyer and Juliet found peace and happiness and built a life together, and it's everything one could have hoped for both characters. There are some ships which are inevitably headed for tragedy, where it's plain as day that they will not end happily. Sawyer and Juliet were not one of these ships, and yet the writers of Lost made the baffling decision to turn them into one when they unceremoniously killed off Juliet at the end of season 5. This is one ship where I cannot and will never reconcile with their ending. While yes, they did eventually find one another in the afterlife, killing off Juliet was a cheap move, put in purely for shock value, and through it, the writers robbed her and Sawyer of their earned happy ending. Many ships have broken my heart, but probably none more so than this pairing, and I will forever remain heartbroken over their tragic demise.
Angel, when I look into the future, all I see is you. All I want is you.
For those who know me, this top pairing will come as no surprise. For those who don't, let me tell you about my love for the vampire with a soul and the human slayer he loves so much that she is literally perfect happiness to him. Buffy and Angel are kind of the very definition of epic love. They are still one of the most iconic vampire-human relationships in media, and their love and connection over both their shows has held me captivated for years. These were two people who were never meant to be together, a slayer and a vampire who found one another and connected through their shared loneliness and isolation and the burden of walking two worlds without belonging to either. Some fans dismiss their relationship as being too full of melodrama or chalk it up to a high school romance, but it is so much more than that. Buffy and Angel were the closest the Buffyverse came to soulmates. They loved one another and lost one another. They lived through the darkest parts of Angel's personality and came out the other side. After Angel lost and regained his soul and returned from hell, they struggled to make their relationship work and eventually realized that they couldn't, but they never stopped loving each other or wanting to be together. Every scene of theirs is emotionally charged, their chemistry is so palpable, the love they have for one another constantly threatening to overtake them. There is a reason they are still remembered as such an epic pairing over 20 years after Buffy first aired. There is something so beautifully tragic about Buffy and Angel, a magic which exists between them, a story which has never been told in a more bittersweet way. And even though other ships have come dangerously close to knocking them off their top spot, in 20 years, no ship has ever succeeded.